Okay, so we're going to go over UV layout. This already has UVs laid out on it, but I'm going to mess them up real quick just for fun. But this is the UVs for this object. I recommend the workflow that I recommend is very simple, but it will be very effective if you follow it. Okay. It can save you lots of trouble, and in comparison to your modeling, this will be a lot easier if you've used this method. Is that enough emphasis? Okay, so we're going to treat this like it's a hard surface model. Okay, and the thing is, when you're modeling and you have a hard surface model, like a car or anything that has a hard surface, then you'll want to lay out the UVs before you duplicate that object. Because if you create one car, say for like a special effect, then there's a good chance that at some point in the future you're going to need it somewhere else also. Or also, like in the case of this pumpkin, I may choose to duplicate it and put it somewhere else in my scene, and then change it up a little bit, and then I could duplicate it again and put it somewhere else in my scene. And I could use a whole bunch of these pumpkins. If I hadn't laid out my UVs yet so that I could paint textures on the surface nice and easy, then I would end up having to lay out UVs on each of these pumpkins individually. But because I already have laid out the UVs on these, they all have the exact same UVs, and therefore I could use the exact same texture on all three of them. Or if I had 500 or 5 million of them, they would all be the same, and I could texture all of them in the same amount of time that it takes to texture one, if I lay out the UVs before I duplicate the geometry. Okay, so this is especially good in like architectural stuff where you're trying, like, had columns or buttresses or windows or just anything that's repetitive. Okay, so let's mess these up a little bit, so I'll have to fix it. So I can actually go to UV mode, and I'll show you this just so you can see that it's possible. You can actually delete the UVs. Oh, maybe mine is smarter now. You used to be able to delete them. Let's see. Okay, so that's a good question. What does UV stand for? And before I can answer that, what I need to describe to you is, it's kind of some fundamentals of three-dimensional space. And to describe 3D space, you have X, Y, and Z axes. And the Z axis is always used to describe the depth, as far as I know. Now, if those are already used to describe three-dimensional space, then our textures, our images that paint surfaces of objects, they exist in a two-dimensional space. But X, Y, and Z are already taken. So we call it UV space. Okay? That's just used to describe the two-dimensional space of components or objects. So it turns out I can't delete these now. I used to be able to do that quite easily.
I know I'm not in the class, but I have worked with UVLayout before, having on the tile and
Yes. Okay, so there's actually more coordinates than even just X, Y, Z, UV. There is a W as well. A lot of times W is used in quaternion space, which we won't get into. I'll spare you. So we can't delete it, so we'll mess it up another way. We'll go to object mode, we'll select this, and then Oh, I can't use my hotbox. I switch my menu set to polygons, and we go to create UVs, and let's do this automatic mapping, just to really, okay, well I just took it from our camera angle. We can do better than that. We'll go to edit UVs, and we're going to go to unitize. Okay, that really boogered it up. Okay, so this now describes the surface of our pumpkin, just like my other one did, but this one's well, impossible to use. So we need to lay out the UVs on this one so that it is usable. So in hard surface modeling, what you want to do is you want to take each panel. So like in a car, what you would do is you could take like a door, and you would project the flat side of the door. Or you could do the whole side of the car all at once if you wanted to. And so you grab all the faces that represent that side of the car. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to select some faces. Then I'm going to press shift period, and I'm going to grab top of my pumpkin. Okay, I ended up grabbing the entire thing. I grabbed too much. So shift comma would remove some of that selection. So let's see if I can. There we go. Okay. So let's say this is the panel that I want to lay out the UVs on, and I don't want to include the stem though, because that will be better if I could see that from the side like this, in this direction. So I need to go through here, and I need to deselect the faces. That are on the stem. Okay, now selection is very important to this. Now that I've got a selection, all I need to do is go to create UVs, and we're always going to use the planar mapping for hard surface UV layout. So I went to the option box on the planar mapping, and if I look at this little doodad in the bottom left corner, the world axis, I can choose the appropriate projection from axes for this camera, or for this projection, sorry. So if I change this to Y, it should shoot straight down on my pumpkin, kind of like this. Okay. Now if I click, let me get my UV texture editor open. So this is what it looks like right now in my UV texture editor here. And if I click apply, this is what it looks like now. That's a lot more comprehensible. So if I were to paint like a Photoshop image on top of this, then the model would pick up on that once we set up our shader network. Okay, so that one's done. Okay, now you'll also see that I have thicker lines on the border in my selection. If I deselect this, let me do this. Face mode. Those thick lines go away. Well, it turns out there's a way to view those. If you go to, well, you don't have to have anything selected. You just go to Display, Polygons, Texture Border Edges, then you're going to see everywhere there's an edge to your what's called a UV shell. So I can select my UV shell like this,